January 27th, 1942, House of Commons, London. Winston Churchill rises to address Parliament during one of Britain's darkest hours. Singapore will fall in 3 weeks. Hong Kong has surrendered. The Eighth Army is in retreat across Libya. British prestige hemorrhages with each news bulletin. And then the Prime Minister does something extraordinary. We have a very daring and skillful opponent against us, and, may I say, across the havoc of war, a great general. He is praising the enemy commander who just humiliated British forces in North Africa. The reaction in the chamber is immediate. Shock, reproach, accusations of defeatism. Churchill knows this. He says it anyway. The man he's talking about is Erwin Rommel, 50 years old, a Württemberg schoolteacher's son. No aristocratic von in his name, no general staff pedigree. And in 18 months, he has turned the North African theater into his personal proving ground. But here's what makes this story different from every other World War II biography you've heard. Rommel didn't just defeat British generals. He got inside their heads. So deep that General Claude Auchinleck, Commander-in-Chief Middle East Forces, had to issue a secret memorandum warning his officers that Rommel was becoming a kind of magician or boogeyman to British troops who were talking far too much about him. Think about that. A British commander had to order his men to stop being afraid of the enemy general's reputation. That's not military history. That's psychological warfare at the strategic level. So why did Allied generals fear him? More importantly, why did they respect him, even as they fought to destroy him? The answer isn't in his tactics, though they were brilliant. It's not in his operational record, though it was formidable. The answer is in what happened when ordinary military logic met Rommel's instinct for the impossible. This is the story of how one general made the desert his weapon, how he turned supply shortages into virtues, how he appeared where enemy intelligence said he couldn't be, and how, in the end, the same qualities that made him legendary also ensured his defeat. But first, let me tell you about the moment that changed everything. February 1941, a harbor in Tripoli. February 12, 1941, Tripoli Harbor, Libya. Major General Erwin Rommel steps onto North African soil with the newly formed Deutsches Afrika Korps. The 49-year-old Württemberg infantry officer carries a camera given personally by Joseph Goebbels to document what Berlin believes will be a defensive holding action. His orders are precise. Stabilize the Italian positions. Block British attempts to drive the Axis from the region. The initial commitment is minimal. 5th Light Division, under strength, with the 15th Panzer Division not expected until late May. 2 divisions, against an empire. Behind him lies France, where his 7th Panzer Division earned the name Ghost Division for appearing where least expected. Ahead lies Marshal Rodolfo Graziani's catastrophic defeat. 130,000 Italian prisoners taken at Beta Fam just 6 days ago. The Western Desert Force, commanded by Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor, has pushed 500 miles in 2 months, destroying 9 Italian divisions. The strategic calculation is stark. North Africa controls access to the Suez Canal, gateway to British colonial empire. It guards approaches to Middle Eastern oil reserves that fuel modern war. Lose Libya, and the entire Mediterranean axis collapses. Rommel watches his tanks roll in circles during a military parade, creating the illusion of fully manned divisions. British intelligence reports masses of German armor arriving. The deception works. Even when resources are scarce, perception shapes reality. March 24, 1941. El Agila, Libya. Rommel attacks. Not in May, when reinforcements arrive, not according to orders from OKW to hold defensive positions. Now, with what he has. The British 3rd Armored Brigade is cut off within hours. General Archibald Wavell, Commander-in-Chief, Middle East, has already weakened his forces by transferring troops to Greece and East Africa. Ultra-intercepts have informed him that Rommel's orders explicitly forbid offensive action until the 15th Panzer Division completes deployment in May. The intercepts are accurate. Rommel received those orders. He places more value on his own assessment of the situation. April 4th. Benghazi falls. April 6th. Night. A German motorcycle patrol captures 2 British generals traveling in an unescorted staff car. Lieutenant General Philip Neame, commander of Cyrenaica forces, and Richard O'Connor himself, the architect of Britain's first victories. Within 3 weeks, Rommel has recaptured virtually all territory lost by Italy since December. British forces retreat to the Egyptian frontier. The sole exception, the 9th Australian Division, besieged in Tobruk under Major General Leslie Morshead. The coastal fortress blocks Rommel's supply route. Without it, further advance becomes mathematically impossible. He has overextended. Supply lines stretch across 400 miles of desert. Fuel shortages halt panzer columns mid-advance. But the psychological damage to British command structure is severe. O'Connor, the man who destroyed Graziani's army, is now in a prisoner of war camp. June 15, 1941. Operation Battle Axe begins at dawn. Wavell launches a major offensive with 900 artillery pieces providing covering fire. The objective? Relieve Tobruk, destroy Rommel's forces, restore British prestige after 2 months of humiliation. The newly formed 8th Army lacks cohesion. Matilda tanks prove too slow. Communication between armor and infantry breaks down repeatedly. Rommel, who personally reconnoiters frontline positions daily, spots the tactical opening. British tanks shrug off conventional anti-tank fire at Halfaya Pass. In a flash of improvisation rooted in his mathematics training, Rommel orders 88mm anti-aircraft guns redeployed horizontally against the approaching Matildas. Captain Wilhelm Bach's defenders at Halfaya Pass repel wave after wave of British armor. The 88s, designed to shoot down aircraft at high altitude, tear through tank armor at point-blank range. The battle turns into disaster. Despite initial successes at Capuzzo, British forces suffer catastrophic tank losses. Rommel executes a daring flanking maneuver, withdrawing his 5th Light and 15th Panzer Divisions under cover of darkness to launch a surprise attack at dawn. The 4th Armored Brigade loses 23 Stuart tanks in a single engagement. Churchill receives Wavell's report. "I have to report with regret that Operation Battle Axe has failed." The Prime Minister roams disconsolately at Chartwell. On June 22nd, the same day the German armies invade the Soviet Union, Wavell is sacked. Awarded the Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath, denied requested leave, ordered to swap posts with General Sir Claude Auchinleck in India. Adolf Hitler promotes Rommel to General der Panzertruppe. At 49, one of the youngest generals in the Wehrmacht. November 18, 1941. Auchinleck launches Operation Crusader. The attack surprises Rommel, who is simultaneously launching his own offensive against Tobruk. For several days, confused tank battles rage around Sidi Rezeg. Rommel personally leads a dramatic dash to the wire on November 24th, hoping to cut British supply lines at the Egyptian frontier. The maneuver causes panic at British headquarters, but the Africa Corps outruns its fuel supplies. The attack grinds to a halt. Auchinleck replaces the exhausted General Alan Cunningham with Neil Ritchie and orders renewed offensive operations. Tobruk becomes the campaign's focal point. For 240 days, the garrison, Australians, British, Polish troops, endures bombardment and repeated assaults. Rommel's November attack nearly succeeds when 21st Panzer Division breaks through the perimeter, only to be repulsed by determined New Zealand counterattacks. By December 7th, Tobruk is relieved. By year's end, Rommel falls back to El Agheila. The Eighth Army has won. But it is a Pyrrhic victory. British armor has suffered severe attrition, logistics remain precarious, and Rommel, though forced to retreat, remains unbroken. General der Panzertruppe, commander of Panzer Group Africa, redesignated from Africa Corps in September to reflect enlarged scope. The legend of the Desert Fox, al-Thalab al-Sahrawi, to Arab populations begins to crystallize. May 26, 1942. Rommel attacks the Gazala line. The British defensive position stretches 40 miles from the coast to the desert interior, anchored by fortified boxes and extensive minefields. Lieutenant General Neil Ritchie commands 8th Army with numerical superiority in tanks and men. Rommel executes a sweeping envelopment around the southern end of the line. The 15th and 21st Panzer Divisions, Italian Ariete Division, and the 90th Light Division swing through the desert, navigating by compass and stars to strike the British rear. The fighting at Bir Hakeim is ferocious. Free French forces under General Marie-Pierre Koenig hold for 16 days against repeated German-Italian assaults. When they finally evacuate on June 11th, they have bought time, but not victory. British armor commits piecemeal, violating fundamental tactical doctrine. Individual brigade attacks are defeated in detail. By June 14th, the Cauldron, the fortified area where Rommel's forces reorganized after initial setbacks, becomes the launching point for breakthrough. The 21st Panzer Division smashes through British positions. Ritchie's command structure disintegrates under pressure. June 21, 1942. Tobruk falls. After 8 months of successful defense in 1941, the fortress surrenders in a single day. Approximately 33,000 Allied troops become prisoners of war. Stores of fuel, ammunition, and supplies fall into Axis hands. Churchill, attending a conference in Washington with President Franklin Roosevelt, receives the news by telegram. "It is," he later writes, "one of the heaviest blows I can recall during the war." Hitler promotes Rommel to Generalfeldmarschall at age 50, the youngest field marshal in German military history. August 13, 1942. Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery arrives in Cairo. He is not the first choice. Lieutenant General William Gott was selected to command 8th Army, but his transport aircraft was intercepted and shot down by Luftwaffe fighters over Egypt on August 7th. Montgomery, 54 years old, meticulous to the point of obsession, steps into command with immediate effect. His first orders? Destroy all contingency plans for retreat. Reinforce Alam Halfa Ridge, the vital high ground behind British lines. Coordinate Army, Navy, and Air Force operations according to detailed, unified planning. Montgomery tells his officers at the first staff meeting, "If we are attacked, then there will be no retreat. If we cannot stay here alive, then we will stay here dead." August 31st. Rommel attacks at Alam Halfa. He has received intelligence that British defenses are weak there. Montgomery has predicted this exact move based on Rommel's North African operational patterns. Strong anti-tank defenses wait along the expected axes of advance. The battle lasts 6 days. Rommel's forces, critically short of fuel, batter themselves against prepared positions. Minefields channel advancing panzers into killing zones. Artillery concentrations devastate exposed formations. By September 5th, the attack is called off. Rommel has lost the initiative. Permanently. Allied reinforcements pour into Egypt. 252 American-built Sherman tanks, 90 M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers, vast quantities of ammunition and supplies. the strategic arithmetic shifts irreversibly. Montgomery spends 2 months training troops, clearing minefields at night, integrating combined arms operations. By late October, 8th Army numbers 231,000 men on rationed strength, facing approximately 104,000 Axis troops. October 23, 1942, 9:40 p.m. The Second Battle of El Alamein begins with a 4-hour ground and air bombardment. British artillery fires across a front 4 divisions wide. The barrage is directed first at German batteries, then at infantry positions. The sound is audible 60 miles away in Alexandria. Montgomery's plan? Operation Lightfoot. Break through Axis minefields in the north while 13th Corps mounts diversionary attacks in the south. Rommel is absent, in Austria, recovering from persistent stomach and nasal problems, believing the British incapable of major offensive before mid-November. General Georg Stumme, temporarily commanding Panzer Army Africa, suffers a fatal heart attack on the first day of battle while under fire. Command devolves to General Wilhelm Ritter von Thoma until Rommel flies back to North Africa on October 25th. The fighting is attritional, methodical, ruthless. Montgomery employs crumbling tactics, limited attacks designed to wear down Axis defensive positions through sustained pressure. Panzer divisions counterattack repeatedly but cannot break through. The 8th Army accepts losses and continues grinding forward. November 2nd. The German line fractures at Kidney Ridge after 2 heavy counterattacks are driven back. November 3rd. Rommel recognizes the position is untenable and begins preparing withdrawal. November 4th, early morning. The 5th Indian Brigade attacks, driving a wedge through Rommel's front. The 1st and 7th Armored Divisions, the 2nd New Zealand Division, go in pursuit. Rommel retreats westward. 4 German and 8 Italian divisions are destroyed or captured. Approximately 30,000 Axis prisoners are taken. British losses: 13,500 casualties, including 4,600 killed. Churchill tells the Lord Mayor's banquet on November 10th, "This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning." November 13th, 1942. Tobruk is recaptured. November 23rd. British forces retake Benghazi. Rommel continues falling back across Cyrenaica, trading space for time, preserving what remains of his army. Fuel shortages make sustained defense impossible. Allied air superiority turns every daylight movement into risk. Montgomery pursues cautiously. Critics argue he should have pressed harder, destroyed Rommel's army completely while it was vulnerable. Montgomery prioritizes minimizing casualties, maintaining supply lines, avoiding overextension. The debate will persist for decades. But the operational reality is undeniable. For the first time since 1940, a major Axis field army has been decisively defeated on land by primarily British Commonwealth forces. January 23, 1943. Allied troops enter Tripoli. The Africa Corps has traveled full circle, back to where it landed in February 1941. 2 years. From triumph to retreat. From expansion to contraction. Rommel continues withdrawing into Tunisia, where German and Italian forces under General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim are already establishing defensive positions. The Africa Corps, battered but not broken, prepares for its final battles. February 14, 1943. Rommel strikes at American forces in Tunisia. The U.S. Second Corps, commanded by Major General Lloyd Friedendahl, occupies positions south of Kasserine Pass. Most American units are inexperienced, newly arrived in theater, unfamiliar with desert warfare. Rommel's 10th and 21st Panzer Divisions smash through Second Corps defenses in a matter of hours. It is his first major engagement against American forces. It will be his last significant battlefield victory. American units fall back in confusion. Friedendahl's command post, located 70 miles behind the front in an underground headquarters complex, loses contact with forward elements. The attack exposes American tactical deficiencies, but demonstrates German capability to inflict sharp defeats even while strategically cornered. Within days, American forces regroup under new leadership. Eisenhower replaces Friedendahl with Major General George S. Patton. Rommel turns back eastward to face Montgomery's 8th Army advancing from Libya. On February 23rd, Army Group Africa is created with Rommel in overall command. Generaloberst Giovanni Messa's army in the south, von Arnim's 5th Panzer Army in the north. March 6, 1943. Rommel's final offensive in North Africa. He attacks British 8th Army positions at Medellin with 10th, 15th, and 21st Panzer Divisions. The objective? Disrupt Montgomery's buildup, buy time for Axis forces to consolidate defenses. Ultra intercepts have forewarned Montgomery of the attack. Strong anti-tank defenses are sited along expected axes of advance. Over 500 anti-tank guns dug in, concealed, zeroed on killing zones. Rommel's panzers advance into prepared positions. 52 tanks are lost in failed assaults. By mid-afternoon, Rommel breaks off the attack. The Africa Corps no longer possesses the strength to overcome determined defense backed by material superiority. March 9, 1943. Rommel flies to Germany to recover his health and report directly to Hitler. Command of Army Group Africa passes to von Arnim. Erwin Rommel will never return to the African theater. May 13, 1943. All Axis forces in North Africa surrender. Over 275,000 prisoners are taken, more than the Germans lost at Stalingrad. The Mediterranean is secured for Allied shipping. The invasion of Sicily and Italy becomes possible. North Africa, the theater that consumed German resources for 28 months, ends in total defeat. For Rommel, appointment as General Inspector of Western Defenses in November 1943. Responsibility for inspected the Atlantic Wall and recommending improvements. Disagreement with Generalfeldmarschall Gerd von Rundstedt over how to meet Allied invasion. Rommel argues armor must be positioned near beaches to defeat landing forces before they consolidate, based on his experience with Allied air superiority in North Africa. July 17, 1944. Rommel's staff car is strafed by RAF fighters near Saint-Foy-de-Montgomery in Normandy. Severe head injuries. Evacuation to Germany for treatment. October 14, 1944. Two generals arrive at Rommel's home in Herrlingen. They carry Hitler's ultimatum: take poison and receive state funeral with family protected, or face trial for complicity in the July 20th assassination plot with family consequences to follow. Rommel chooses cyanide. He is 52 years old. The official announcement? Death from war injuries. The state funeral is conducted with full military honors. Only later does the truth emerge. Winston Churchill tells Parliament in 1942, "We have a very daring and skillful opponent against us, and, may I say, across the havoc of war, a great general." The tribute is double-edged. Rommel's tactical brilliance is undeniable. His operational instincts, his ability to appear where least expected, his gift for improvisation under pressure, these mark him as exceptional. But strategy requires more than tactical virtuosity. Rommel's chronic disregard for logistics contributed to every one of his defeats. His romantic bias for action, his tendency to lead from the front rather than command from headquarters, his habit of turning off radios to avoid orders limiting his freedom. These are qualities that make compelling narratives, but problematic command practice. North Africa was always a secondary theater for Germany. Hitler never committed resources necessary for decisive victory. The Africa Corps fought outnumbered, undersupplied, against enemies with growing material superiority and uncontested naval dominance. Rommel extracted maximum operational effect from minimum strategic investment. But operational excellence cannot compensate for strategic impossibility. He remains, nonetheless, der Wüstenfuchs, the desert fox, the commander who twice drove the British back to Egypt, the general both sides acknowledged as formidable, the man who, uniquely among senior German commanders, earned respect from Arab populations who saw him as liberator rather than oppressor. 2 German military bases carry his name. Streets in multiple cities commemorate him. His 1937 book on infantry tactics remains studied. The myth and the man blur together, heroic defender against unjust orders, or ambitious officer who served a criminal regime until circumstance removed him. History records both. The daring commander at Tobruk and the field marshal who accepted a villa looted from Jewish owners. The officer who refused to execute captured commandos, and the commander who never explicitly opposed the Einsatzgruppen planning to follow his army into Egypt and Palestine. The desert preserves no verdicts, only outcomes. Sand covers the wreckage of tanks, British and German alike, scattered across Libya and Egypt. What remains is operational record, victories won against superior numbers, defeats suffered when logistics finally collapsed, and the question history cannot definitively answer: could any commander have done better with what Germany was willing to commit to Africa? The campaign ended. The legend endures.